Hello, and welcome to Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, the Sharjah Biennial 16 edition, sponsored by the Sharjah Art Foundation.
I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu.
The Sharjah Art Foundation is an advocate, catalyst, and producer of contemporary art within the Emirate of Sharjah and the surrounding region. In dialogue with the international arts community, the Foundation advances an experimental and wide-ranging programmatic model that supports the production and presentation of contemporary art, preserves and celebrates the distinct culture of the region, and encourages a shared understanding of the transformational role of art. Organized by the Foundation, Sharjah Biennial's 16th edition, SB16, convenes under the title To Carry, a multivocal and open-ended proposition, exploring the ever-expanding questions of what it means to carry and how to carry it. SB16 is an invitation to encounter the different formations and positions of the 5 curators, as well as the constellation of resonances they have gathered. Curated by Aliyah Swastika, Amal, Khalaf, Megan Tamati Quinnell, Natasha Jin, and Zainab Oz, the biennial unveiled more than 650 works by nearly 200 participants, including more than 200 new commissions. The biennial was launched on February 6, 2025, and will continue through June 15, 2025. During this exclusive capsule season, I'll engage in dialogue and discourse with artists participating in the Sharjah Biennial who are presenting new commissions. Throughout the series, you'll hear from artists across the globe, from Australia and Kenya to London and Nigeria and more. You'll hear us discuss a wide range of topics, from each artist's practice to their reflections on our society and the questions they investigate through their work. Please join me as I share these dynamic conversations with you, exploring the ins and outs and inner worlds of artists participating in the Sharjah Biennial with their newly commissioned works. Let's go!
In this episode, I'm joined by Rajni Perera as we discuss her newly commissioned works presented for the 16th edition of the Sharjah Biennial, elucidated through the curatorial theme To Carry, asking questions such as what does it mean to carry a home, a history, a language, a legacy, and a lineage. Rajni was born in Sri Lanka in 1985 and lives and works in Toronto, Canada. She explores issues of hybridity, futurity, ancestorship, migrant and marginalized identities and cultures, monsters, and dream worlds. These themes come together to fuel explorations within a multimedia practice that includes drawing, painting, clay, wood, lanterns, new media sculptures, textile, and most recently, synthetic taxidermy. In this episode, Rajni discusses how the dual influences of Canadian and Sri Lankan cultures shapes her art, while highlighting the importance of contrasting her artisanal roots with Western art school experiences and hands-on skill-based creation. She also goes into greater detail discussing the work Gatekeeper, which explores themes of birth, motherhood, and the complexities around these subjects. The site of her installation holds significance as a site of history and memory. Let's dive into my next episode with Rajni Perera.
Hello, my name is Rajni Perera. I am a multidisciplinary artist. I live in Toronto, Canada. I'm from Sri Lanka originally. I migrated here with my family, and we are part of the very large Sri Lankan diaspora that's in Canada. And I am a mother as well. And I make work about that sometimes, but I make artwork about myself, the immigrant experience from my own life experiences, and then also science fiction, which I love, and also work about the natural world, which I also deeply love. So that's me.
I love that introduction. It gives us a really good entry point. We're having the second round of our conversations from a first conversation that we had in Sharjah. As we spoke, we were just like in the garden area
In
where
a
your work.
beautiful courtyard.
Yes, in that beautiful courtyard. Thank you for that. It was such a special place in so many ways. But I think being able to just sit there after you were introducing your work and we were on the tour and you were talking about everything, and just to be able to capture that moment is so lovely. And as we talk today, I want to expand a bit outward into your practice more broadly. You shared that you're currently based in Toronto and you have been for some time. There's a large diasporic community there, originally from Sri Lanka. How would you say that both of these places have influenced and continue to influence your work and your approach to making?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question because I really feel like I'm between both. And many of us are just on the daily. So, like, I have a Canadian passport. Meanwhile, not just myself, like, all of us don't necessarily feel the any kind of the privileges of like truly being Canadian or anything like that. Like, we end up being second class citizens. So that's a very funny feeling, and that is influential in my work, even though I don't want to harp on the trauma of it or the hard times of it, but definitely that's there in my daily life and our daily lives. So that comes through in the work. There's a series called Traveler, which is all about the immigrant experience through the lens of science fiction. And I've loved sci-fi since I was very small. And for me, the protagonists of science fiction, for me, are very clearly people of color, borderless people, folks who have been forced to leave because of civil war or environmental catastrophe. And so what did these I like use this lens of futurism and mutation to talk about the future of the human race as it relates to immigrants and the borderless or the unbordered, I guess you could say. It's interesting that I have the privilege, because of my place in my career, which I worked really hard for, I get to actually go back home and keep going back home to Sri Lanka. So that it adds a lot of depth to my experience as a diasporic person who's in between both cultures. Actually put myself in a straddling position where, yes, I'm based out of here. I work all around the world now, but I'm based out of here, which is the North America, which is a colony. I live in a British colony. It tries to colonize me daily. And I also go back home to another colony. Sri Lanka is also a British colony. And to watch it change and respond to the oppression of colonialism back home. And while also Sri Lanka is so beautiful and healing and nourishing for me, I think it's really important for diasporic artists, if you want to participate in this conversation and in a way that's fruitful, if you can try to keep going back home and respond to a place which is in real time, not from archives of, say, like suffering or like historical archive alone. I feel like there's some diasporic work it's trauma porn, and it's people made by folks and artists who, yes, they're diasporic, but necessarily there's not a real conversation. It's a lot of reading. But I just felt in the beginning that was me, but as soon as I could go back home and make that conversation really rich and dynamic for myself, things became more interesting for me personally, making work about this. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and it really gives me a great place to jump off to and think about a lot of your artistic focus and the way that you create work that explores themes of, one, science fiction and that imagery, ideas around magic realism, and how the influences of your Sri Lankan and South Asian heritage really weave themselves into your work in this visual landscape that's really rich and dynamic. And I think about that, the idea that science fiction writers are dreamers, right? People who are thinking about what does not currently exist and what can exist, what could be possible, is a really liberatory way of thinking about the world, especially when one considers coming from parts of the world where where there's this deep-seated colonial history, and going to another place like Canada where you also have that. And just as I'm centering myself as a Black American woman who's half Nigerian, culturally, I'm American. I've lived in New York my whole life, and that has shaped me immensely and continues to impact the way that I think about so many things. And I think that there's constantly, for me, this process of learning and unlearning. And I actually talk about this a lot. Like when I get into deep conversations with people, I often talk about this idea of unlearning and the challenge that one finds themselves tasked with to try to peel back these layers of what you think is real, what actually exists as reality, like a lived experience that is truly real. And then also asking yourself, what could become real? What could be? What are the possibilities? So I really want to hone in on how you use elements of science fiction, magical realism, and the heritage and history of Sri Lanka, of Southeast Asia, to weave in these stories and these narratives that you're creating, but also just how you're making work.
Yeah. I love that you use the word weave in the question. It's very smart. It points me towards materiality and the way that conceptualizes itself inside the work. So very nicely done. I come from a deep and artisanal history. It was a huge shock to come here. I come from a working class family. We didn't go to plays. We didn't have cultural theory books in our house. So I came from just, I self-curricularized while I was in Canada towards what I needed to know and wanted to know. I come from a deep artisanal history where fine art, what we consider to be fine art here, back home, it's the amount of hours and skill and like knowledge passed down and made by hands. Like that's fine art back home. So when I came here and I'm in an Western art school or a white art school, and your art is as good as how many books you've read or how many ideas that are very abstract that you have access to and feel a lot of ease with, that was like the determining factor in that your art is good or evaluated as good by other people who think the same. I was really confused by that, and also I didn't buy it. I was like sus on all of it. I was like, this is weird, because then it's 2 out of maybe 25, 30 people that are going to understand this even or have a way into understanding this work that's like very convoluted, but they're saying it's good. I was like, I don't really understand. So like my practice started there where that's the way, like there was a bit of angst and disbelief at the beginning of my journey that prompted me to go on a path and be like, okay, I come from a place where we make a lot, and our art where I come from is in homes. It's enjoyed on a daily basis. It's not locked away in museums. There's that, but beautiful garments that are made by someone who's so good at it. Paintings in homes, batik, which is like beautiful tie-dye techniques that we use to create artwork. That's spiritual and also like daily life artwork, carving and woodworking and metallurgy and jewelry making. So that for me was like it. And I was like, okay, these are the skills and ways of making that I want to bring together to deliver my ideas. So that's maybe one part of the way that my heritage, which I bring here, makes its way into my work. It's like it's pretty on purpose. I don't want to engage with abstraction and conceptual art, found object art. It's just not, I don't come from it. And I never bought it in school. And to my disappointment, watching sort of colleagues in school of color falling into this sort of white elitist art making kind of visual practice that was just like, okay, I'm going to read a ton and a ton, which is fine. But like the work's going to end up just being about that and like regurgitating white ideas and also like minstreling your ancestral trauma for white institutions. I'm not going to do that. That's shameful. And I don't, more power to them. But I also think that time has passed now. And artists are like, okay, let me just flex my muscles of what I can make, and I taught myself to make, and in some cases learn to make back home and tell my stories in this way. So a series like Traveler, just in regards to materiality, which is a great way you asked this question. For example, in that series, I'm using quite a few Southeast Asian, like South Indian and Sri Lankan textile making techniques that show up on these figures. And the style that I paint them in is also from back home. And it's something I taught myself to paint in a miniaturist style. And in particular, sort of in Rajput style miniaturism, and also the Southern Buddhist style of painting from Sri Lanka, which is illustrated scenes of the court again, and spiritual scenes of the Buddha's life. There are temples covered in this beautiful way of painting, which, to be honest, when I was in school, I was asked the question of, am I drawing or am I painting? Because the way that I'm painting is too drawing-like for them to see as painting. Meanwhile, I come from like a 2,000-year history of painting like this. So even the concept of painting, that's colonized within teaching institutions, and I was up against that as well. And so here's another example where materially and technique-wise, where I come from is coming through in the stories I'm telling.
This is a good moment for us to pan back, to immerse ourselves in the opening week of the Sharjah Biennial. Listen in as Rajni and I sit in a beautiful courtyard in the site where her installation Gatekeeper is displayed, as we discuss her newly commissioned work for the Sharjah Biennial.
So we're in the gardens and we just did a tour of your work, and this is a good moment to really reflect, take a break from the opening of the Sharjah Biennial, and think a little bit about what you're investigating. I'd like to start with the space and how you conceived of not only the body of work, but more specifically how the space would be able to speak to what it was and what it is that you're presenting.
Yeah, that's especially in regards to the new commission, Gatekeeper. I just found out from the curatorial tour that it used to be a hospital, which is wild now.
Wow.
Because the piece is about birth.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
All that synergy.
That's crazy.
1,000%.
1,000% crazy. So the Wells room is something we saw. They sent me lots of photos of this site, which is we're at Beit El Circal across the square from the Sharjah Art Museum. And Natasha had this space in mind for me, but not necessarily a certain part of it. And she's, okay, just look at the photos of the site. Tell me if it speaks to you. And I was like, what's going on with those wells? What is that? She's like, yeah, this used to be a part of this building in a huge way, because that's from before there was plumbing.
Wow.
I think the outsides of it have been updated, but those wells have been there. Really? They're probably 200-300-year-old wells. And so that was a really incredible thing to find out about that space. But I chose that space, had a good feeling about it. And I wanted to do a work that went from one well to the other. I'm a Sri Lankan person. And then when you grow up back home, there are wells everywhere, whether people use it or not. And of course, when there's a well, there's like the risk of a kid falling in, no one being around. And so there are a lot of stories. There's a lot of mythology and spooky tales about wells and who comes out and who lives there and what's going to happen to you. And that's in the context of Sri Lankan spooky mythology, period. Like one of our first historical accounts is in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, where we're the land of demons and monsters. People go there to research paranormal activity because it's weird. It's weird in Sri Lanka. Things get weird. I think it's very beautiful. I think that there are many portals and gateways back home between this world and other worlds. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I wanted to choose the well room and to show it as a portal, as an opening, a place that opens and closes, or a place that is a transitional space between. And in the case of, say, a hospital, a well would represent the sort of the divide between no water for healing and quenching and cleaning, and water for all of those things. So already that's an amazing thing for me to find out. The piece Gatekeeper is about birth, and it's about being A lot of moms have seen this piece today and felt all kinds of ways about it, which is what I wanted. But that work and that whole series of work is about my own feelings on being a mother in the year 2025. This is definitely a different world than, say, our parents had children in, and like the feelings that they had when they had us. Now I I have a lot of complex feelings around birthing and the reasons that people with birthing bodies want to give birth and want to bring people into this world. I'm sure there's been times throughout history when women feel ways about birthing, different ways, like not just a good and simple feeling about it. So I just wanted to investigate that with this work. And the series includes these sort of signs and signifiers of birthing. Then they have a treatment. They have a surface treatment, or they have this juxtaposition within the work of elements from places of immense power over other people. That includes religious institutions, government institutions and buildings, hospitals, there were all sorts of places that house the people who make decisions on our behalf. So just wanting to make work about this, and this is one of the, I said it before in the curatorial talk, it's one of the series that I feel very strongly about, like in my daily life. That is a series of work I'm making to investigate my own feelings on a matter.
It sounds like the site specificity of Sharjah, the backdrop of this place and this building, really also impacted potentially what you have decided to show and your use of the space that was allotted to you.
Do you mean the well room or all the
And the well room specifically?
Yeah, for sure.
And being able to be in a different dialogue than just a white wall gallery space. If your work had been at the Sharjah Art Museum or at the Sharjah Art Foundation, where all of the galleries are, and it was in this white room, it would be a very different work. And I wouldn't have come up with that. I came up with this piece to respond to the wells particularly, both in their physical structure, because you can see that she's seated there as a seat, but also I needed to be able to pass that umbilical cord from well to, and in this case there are two, but I wanted it to feel like it's looping, like she's pulling forever. She's always going to sit there pulling and pulling people from not existing into existence. So yeah, and in terms of just showing a piece like that in a gallery, that didn't come into the question because I chose that first. I was just like, make sure I get the well room. I want to do something with portals. And then shortly after only did I start painting and making the series. The series that work is from is called Birth is a Blood Sport. Started making these works and painting women covered in sort of tiles, and I want to do like a government agency, like you know how they have these carpets that are government agency, government institution carpets. So I want to do stuff like that. Started to think about it, and then I did two proposals before I did this one, and Natasha was like, that's the one. Yeah, it's pretty bespoke. It's pretty custom with the space. And do you often in your practice have an opportunity to work in a way where you're really engaging with place as another part of the conversation?
I wish there was more.
And this is
excited about
beautiful opportunity to do that.
I loved it. I want more. This is why I don't get it that often. I haven't had it that often. Colombo Scope, I did again and again. Natasha's just good. She's just good at her job. So she finds the place. Rajni, what do you think about this though? Can you respond to this? Because she knows she's thinking in my work like the way that I would. So it's a really nice synergy to work with Natasha, because she lives in the place where I come from, and I long to live there too. Yeah. She loves it. So we have this love of Sri Lanka that kind of anchors us. Its history, its spookiness, like all this stuff, the fruits and flowers of it, the people of it, like we just like it so much. So we're like bonded in this way. So I think there's a mutual understanding that's like also a little bit unspoken, the way we work together. Yes. But yeah, I just hope that there are more of these types of opportunities to intervene in a sneaky way.
Yes, I love how you intervened, and I love that this space was a hospital, and now
crazy,
really wild, really crazy. We're good.
Okay.
That's a good place to land. One thing I want to hone in on is really the curatorial theme to carry and the wide range of what that holds, not only in one's mind, but also in the physical. And I want to ask a bit about working with Natasha. So, working with Natasha Jinwala on this biennial and being really in what I imagine is close collaboration and close dialogue. What have been some of the most rewarding parts for you of the artistic and curatorial collaboration among you?
Yeah, Natasha is so thoughtful and she invites me to participate in the cool stuff she's doing in a way that is always like interesting to me. I've rarely been put in like a cube gallery by Natasha. She's just like thinking outside of that, which I appreciate so much. A good example is the Well Room of Sharjah. And I proposed a few times to come up with that work. And in the end, I'm so happy with the way that came out, what it says to display, to have this installation that considers the well as a portal. I really like the way she thinks. Natasha thinks very well. And that comes forward in the way that she curates and the artists that she puts into the spaces that she puts into. I have worked with her in Colombo Scope, I think it was 4 years ago. And often what comes out is I get to experiment. Normally, I feel like institutions in general, never mind curators, just let's say a museum, they'll go to an artist with this idea of what the artist does and expect that's the same of them. But Natasha doesn't do that because she knows me and she knows that I have to be learning at all times and I have to try new things to be interested and I have to be pushed a little bit outside, even as risky as, and also she'll give me lots of freedom. So that ends up just in a really nice way where we both feel good and satisfied that the bases are covered. Just like I'm saying my story, and she is allowed to tell her story in this way, and I'm feel rewarded by risk at the end of it. Colombo Scope was great, where I was wanting to do work with clay with a very limited experience. Like the clay that I use normally, that my fabrication techniques are based on what I've learned from prop making for TV and film, which is what I used to do to pay some of my school fees. And that is all new materials, styrofoam, foam coats, lots of different adhesives and polymer clays and varnishes and things like that to get a pretty much a bang on result most of the time. But clay is something that I really wanted to try. And so she put out feelers and she found an amazing teacher for me named Sarat Chandrajiva, who on his own is an incredible artist, by the way. I didn't really know him. And as I met him for that Colombo Scope fabrication and got to work with him, I became starstruck over time with kind of what he's done with his own practice. And I'd never heard about him before. So that was really that's an example of an experience with Natasha. It's okay, what do you want to work on? That's interesting. Okay, let me find some people and she'll find me at least someone to help me find what I need. So that was made on the west coast of Sri Lanka and then shown outside the public library of Colombo. And then I got to respond to another call, which is for a lantern. And I do these lanterns, mainstream science fiction lanterns of spacecraft from Star Wars and Star Trek. And I got to work with a kite maker in Colombo in the library itself as well to make this lantern of the Starship Enterprise, which we then showed at the Rio Theater, which is one of the main venues of Colombo Scope. Beautiful old theater. And then they curated Colombo Scope and Natasha curated the entire building all the way to the top floor, including the theater itself. So that was displayed there. So there's another example of responses to sites. And in the case of the Sharjah venue, which is Bayt El Serkal, it's across from the Sharjah Art Museum. And I got 3 rooms in there. One of them is a museological presentation of a series called Phylogeny, which is ongoing. And it criticizes the way that we make knowledge about the natural world. And then I have work. So she gave me a full room for that because that was necessary. We needed to paint the walls a certain way, light things a certain way, present these plinths or small dioramas of the mutated future biomes within that room, together with paintings that were borrowed and a new painting as well. So that was kept aside. And then we have the well room, which is adjacent to it, which includes water, which is a work about a mythological bad girl, Kuveni. And then right next to that is the piece Gatekeeper. And then upstairs we have another work called Watermaker from the Traveler series. And it's like a technological exploration of how to come across something that we need in a place that doesn't have it. So in that work, we have a small machine, a being holding a small machine that creates water in the desert.
Yeah, and you sharing all of the ways in which you've collaborated with Natasha over different iterations, different projects. It sounds like the way that you two are able to work in partnership with each other is really something that allows you both to really thrive. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, that's true. I think we're both explorers in a kind of way. Neither of us want to be very comfy. And this comes up even if our chats together. It's like we always tell each other, we have to rest. We have to rest. Where is our rest? But we're itchy. Like we need to explore. So it's so good to work with someone else who's like that, just because, yeah, I'm not that interested in that much comfort while working, or I don't want to have my ideas stay stagnant and not developing and not growing. And I feel like Natasha is the same. We need our ideas to grow and reach out and change and have new conversations and new disagreements. And like we need a changeful dynamic that which results in a progression of what we ourselves think, never mind what we're saying or putting out there.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible. It's wonderful to hear you reflect on being able to be in such deep and close partnership and collaboration with Natasha. And for all of the folks listening, if you have an opportunity to go to the Sharjah Biennial to see Rajni's work, Rajni, this has been an incredible episode. And I'm so happy that we got a chance to talk more deeply about your practice and some of the ideas and the ways in which you're investigating your work, and you're investigating bigger topics, bigger
Yeah.
concepts through the
Yeah.
visual landscape.
Yeah. It's been really fun to work in the Sharjah Biennial and so nice to talk to you about that, Shadid.
That was my episode with Rajni Perera. I want to give a big thank you to Rajni for joining me on the show.
Thank you for tuning in to this capsule season of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, the Sharjah Biennial 16 edition, sponsored by the Sharjah Art Foundation. These episodes were recorded both on site and remotely during the opening week and after the opening of the 16th edition of the Sharjah Biennial. During the episodes, you will hear the sights and sounds of the local environment from the various sites across the Emirate of Sharjah where the biennial takes place. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and I'll see you next time. Stay tuned for my next episode. As always, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay up. Peace and love to all.